Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back to more of our virtual conversations. Our show is about the coronavirus crisis, a crisis unlike any we have confronted in our lifetime. The figures are stark and sobering. 750,000 Americans have been infected. At least 40,000 have died. We have 90% of the country under lockdown, and 12 million have filed for unemployment claims. And these figures do not begin to reflect the dimensions of the problem, as it has been estimated that 90% of Americans have not yet been exposed. With us is Jay Johnson. Jay Johnson was the Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security in the Obama administration. Before that, he was General Counsel of the Department of Defense. Jay Johnson recently wrote a compelling article in The Hill in which he argued we have to stop the political blame game in Washington and focus instead on stopping the spread and planning for a post-coronavirus world. We're delighted to welcome Jay Johnson back to the program.
Jim, thanks for having me back on your show. I look forward to our discussion.
Well, I as well. And I take it what you're saying is we should leave to history whether the CDC screwed up or the FDA screwed up, and we should be looking forward. But what do you propose that we do?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, Jim. This is not going to be easy. First, let's look at where we are right now. The way the White House characterizes it is we're in a downward trajectory. Now, the very use of that phrase implies that we're coasting. We're not coasting. We're still in the depths of this crisis. Our healthcare workers, our healthcare community, our hospitals are on overload right now. They're heroic, but they're under tremendous stress. There are not enough beds. There are not enough ventilators. There's not enough PPE. So we're still in the depths of this crisis. And so first and foremost, though we can see light at the end of the tunnel, we've got to remain disciplined, remain vigilant, remain quarantined, remain in physical distancing before we can begin to return to life as normal. Now, life is normal. I strongly suspect, Jim, that there's going to be a new normal. From this experience, we will practice better hygiene, some form of social distancing, and our economy and our workforce and our social lives will have to come back in phases, in test phases, so to speak, where we take steps, and testing will be critical to this. Contact tracing will be critical to this effort. You don't just open the gates and let everybody out all at once to go back to where life was normal. We're going to have to take this one step at a time. And I know Governor Murphy, my state, and Governor Cuomo, where I work in New York, and others in the region are thinking carefully about this, and they've asked some of us who live in these states to come together and help them think through this. But it's a tough question, Jim, but we're going to have to take this in steps, and contact tracing and testing will be integral to that effort.
But of course, the president wants to reopen America on May 1. Do you think that's a rash proposal?
I don't see that happening in the manner in which he has described it. This has got to happen in phases. And let's remember that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. What works for somebody here in northern New Jersey or in Midtown Manhattan is different for the cattle rancher in say, North Dakota. And so there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And as you know, the governors across the country have put in place various different forms of quarantine, physical distancing that is appropriate for them. And so in some respects, our economy, our workforce, America has remained open to essential workers, but you can't have it happen all at once.
Well, suppose Minnesota opens up for the cattle rancher because there are low levels of spread there, and you have a friend who's a cattle rancher in Minnesota, and you decide to go visit him, shake his hand, maybe give him a hug, because Minnesota's done so well. Doesn't that court the danger of further spread of the virus, since you live in a high spread area?
Well, to be sure, somebody from a high spread area traveling to some place where the virus is not as prevalent does itself create a risk. And so there will likely need to be continued in place for a period of time limits on non-essential travel. But let's remember that one size does not fit all. And so we're going to have to do this in phases. My issue with Jim, my issue with the White House messaging is the president, the vice president, the White House is so anxious to get us back to normal, to get the economic engine running again. Now that's of course desirable. That's an important goal to have.
Very legitimate.
But their messaging is not accompanied by what I believe to be the equally important, if not more important, message of we got to stay the course. We've got to continue with the efforts we've made up to now in order to get to where we want to be. This is no time, because we see light at the end of the tunnel, to begin to get sloppy and to begin to shortcut some of the restrictions that our governors and mayors have put in place. I understand people are getting impatient. People are getting, weary of staying at home. They want to get out again. People want to go back to work. But it is essential for public health reasons that we continue to abide by these restrictions until our governors and mayors tell us it's okay.
Well, if we open up too early, it may mean more spread, which means more lockdown and more social distancing. And
yeah, let's be clear.
This be worse for the economy.
This virus will not disappear. It will remain with us for the foreseeable future until there's a vaccine, until there is a treatment, and there will almost certainly be, at some level, some form of resurgence of the virus. We know, for example, that happened in West Africa with the Ebola virus in 2014. So as people go back to life as normal, even in stages, there will be some form of a resurgence. We all hope and pray it won't be nearly as disastrous as this one, but the virus is not going away where all of a sudden, hey, it's all clear, we can all come out of hiding. So we've got to do this very carefully.
Well, the level of testing has been terribly disappointing. The president promised about a month ago 27 million tests, and only 4 million have been conducted. So clearly we need more tests. We're not doing very much in the area of contact testing. There doesn't seem to be serious consideration of something that's worked in South Korea, which is you go into a building today, or before the virus started, when you could go into a building, you show an ID. In South Korea, they take your temperature as you go into the building. They do it digitally, it's very fast, and that's something that's worked for them. They've managed to flatten the curve. You see restrictions like that being imposed in the post-coronavirus world?
Interesting question. What works in certain regimes of a certain size may not work for the United States of America. We are a free and open society. We enjoy civil liberties. We, in normal times, enjoy the freedom to travel, the freedom to associate, the freedom to assemble. I don't see us able to have a situation where in every single workplace in America, you take somebody's temperature before they walk in the front door. And this is a point where I think we need to make clear what the roles of the respective governments are in the US, because I think there's a considerable confusion about that. So,
let's examine that for a minute, because this seems to be very much about politics. President Trump, of course, is facing a re-election campaign. He calls his campaign to open up America, opening up America again, which resonates with a political slogan. That's one of his favorites. He originally, it was really hard to follow. He said that he had the ultimate authority, the sole authority to reopen the country, and he could override any of the governors. Then he told the governors that they could call the shots. Then he criticized certain governors because they were too restrictive, and he said we should liberate Michigan, liberate Virginia, where just so happens they're Democrat governors. Isn't this really all about politics, and should we be injecting politics into what's an issue of science and public health?
It's head spinning. And the answer to your question is no, we should not be injecting politics into this. I don't see where politics should play a role at all. So let's start with this. The public health and police power to require people to stay at home, to require people to stay away from their workplace, resides at the state and local level. I sit here in my home in Montclair, New Jersey, by virtue of an order of the governor of New Jersey. I am forbidden to go to my place of work, my law firm in Midtown Manhattan, by virtue of an order of the governor of New York. The federal government has, of course, the power and the authority through the president, through the Secretary of Homeland Security, to limit international travel, to regulate our international borders, and some authority, emphasis on the word some, to regulate the interstate travel of contaminated persons. But that is a person-by-person authority. Where the federal government's principal value is in a national crisis like this is resources. Marshaling and surging resources through the Defense Production Act and other authorities, it's the federal government that ought to be shepherding resources like test kits, like ventilators, like PPE, to the communities where we need them most, so you don't end up in a bidding war between states and including the federal government, which I'm afraid is what we have now. Now, you mentioned the phrase liberate. Here's the problem with that. First, I don't see how the President of the United States can say in one breath, on one day, it's up to you governors to decide when to bring people back to work, and then issue a tweet saying, liberate Michigan, liberate Minnesota, which is making the governor's jobs that you just gave them even more complicated. To any English-speaking person, Jim, and I know you'll appreciate this, the word liberate implies protest. It implies fight for your freedom. It implies even disobedience of an order issued by a state or local authority. So the president has made the governor's jobs more complicated by putting out tweets like that. And you know, the reality is that we've been living with this for 39 months during the Trump presidency. There are essentially two Donald Trumps. There's the official Donald Trump that you see scripted by Stephen Miller and Jared Kushner, that is some form of conservatism, federalism, and nationalism. And then there's the unscripted Donald Trump, who's on Twitter and at the press conferences, who basically says, I have the right to do anything I want. I think that's virtually a quote. And that's where we are. And for some reason, something like 40% of the American public tolerates that, even though the latter Donald Trump does not feel obliged at all to be consistent with the former Donald Trump. But that's where we are. But the job here is mainly going to be up to the governors and the mayors to get us back to work.
Isn't this something of an historical inconsistency? Because Republicans historically have all been for states' rights, federalism, pointing to the Constitution, talking about the powers that are reserved to the states. And Democrats historically have believed in a strong central government. And Republicans have a certain fear of socialization and centralized infrastructure. Ronald Reagan, the government is the problem, not the solution, federal government. Now, Trump seems to have stood it on its head, because you have Democrats saying, well, the state should take charge. This is up to the governors. This is within the police power. And Trump is saying, no, I am the state. I am the state. L'état c'est moi. And I have the ultimate call on reopening the country. So isn't there something inconsistent about all that?
The answer to your question is yes, underscored, exclamation point. It answers itself. I can't state it any better than you just did. Conservatives typically are suspicious of federal power and believe that for the most part, the authority to control our behavior, to the extent it should exist at the local level, not at the national level. And depending upon what day of the week it is, our president's view of his authorities turns that on its head. It's also simply lacking. The president just does not have the authority to compel a private citizen to remain in their home. As I've specified in my prior answer, the federal government's authorities in this kind of situation are rather limited. That's the way the framers of our Constitution wanted it, and that's what we have.
Yes, so, but a state would have that authority. The governor of a state would have that authority, in your view, in the exercise of the police power. And I suppose imposing a quarantine is a classic exercise of police power.
Or a curfew, for that matter.
Or a curfew. The question is, where does all that leave us? Because as you pointed out, the president is undermining the governors in their effort to exercise the police power.
Well, the authority to lift the executive orders in place, the authority to bring people back to our new normal in phases, should reside at the level of governors and mayors. Rightly, some of them have come together because they realize that you've got places like the tri-state area here, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, where there's so much interstate travel just to go to work every day that they've got to collaborate. They've got to come together on this. You can't have one solution for New York and a completely different solution for New Jersey, for those of us who are commuters like me. And so smartly, governors in this region, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware have come together to try to come up with a regional solution. That it's smart because you've got a lot of interstate daily travel to commute to work, and because our workforces rather resemble each other.
And there's precedent for that, isn't there? Because you have the Port Authority, for example. Interstate compacts are something we've had for a long time. And there's similar interstate efforts to coordinate in the Midwest and Illinois and Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and also in the far West with Washington.
Right. And I'm quite sure that politics will not play a role in that, and nor should it. But I fear that politics is beginning to infect itself in the dialogue, in the discourse. What we don't want to have happen is you've got the federal government and the states governments doing this, basically, where the states are saying, well, I can't do my job because the federal government won't do its job. And you've got the president at the national level saying, I want you to be able to go back to work. It's the states that are preventing you from doing that. And I think in that circumstance, the voting public would be entitled to be very frustrated and throw up its hands. And I hope that doesn't happen.
Well, also, the federal agencies seem to be in conflict with the White House. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, that was one of the agencies under your umbrella as the Secretary for Homeland Security. The CDC, which is under the Department of Health and Hospitals, I guess, but they work together, and they've all warned against a staged reopening, or they say it's just going to increase the spread, that we have to wait out the time. And they point to China, where they've been at it for 3 months, and they claim they flattened the curve, if they're telling the truth. And we've only been at it for a month, and it seems a reopening would be premature.
Well, Jim, when this is all over, Washington is going to do what it does best, which is second guess. There will be committee hearings, commissions, studies, and the like about what we should have done differently, why the president acted the way he did, why he didn't act sooner. But if we had to live life all over again, DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, which includes FEMA, should have had a central role at the federal level in marshaling resources. FEMA, coupled with the Army Corps of Engineers, is a very can-do organization. They know how to make things happen. You give them their orders and they go do. And FEMA knows how to deploy resources, marshal resources better than any federal agency. I saw that myself, my 3 years as secretary. And so from day one, FEMA should have been put in charge of this with the secretary and the president overseeing the whole thing. But it's not where we are. From the daily briefings at the White House, there lacks a certain consistency. We saw the FEMA administrator for a while, then we don't see him anymore. We saw the commander of the Army Corps of Engineers for a while, we don't see him anymore. But those two entities should have a central role in responding to a national crisis like this.
What about our cultural life and our sporting life, actually, in the post-coronavirus world? Will theaters reopen right away? Will stadiums reopen right away? How do we deal with that? We're going to have temperature gauges at Giant Stadium, I guess now called Citi Field or whatever.
I don't know that we're going to have the resources to take the temperature of every single person that enters a 40,000 seat stadium. And so we're likely going to have to do this in phases. I, as much as anybody, want to see us get back to Mets games, Yankees games, Giants games, Jets games. My favorite restaurant there in Manhattan, or my favorite restaurant here in Montclair, New Jersey. We've got a lot of good ones, by the way, Jim, here. But I suspect—
I wish I could be on my way.
Otherwise, if we do it all at once, we're going to risk a resurgence of this virus.
Yes.
We'll set ourselves back to where we were in late February, early March. And so, regrettably, I think we're just going to have to do this in phases. And what worries me, because this is an invisible enemy, a lot of people will underestimate and undervalue the threat. This is, as I heard Tony Fauci say, a very efficient virus. It can contaminate rapidly, and it's very contagious, but we don't see it. And a lot of people have it and they're asymptomatic, and a lot of people have it and never get to a hospital. You and I have a friend who is 80 years old, who came down with this virus, didn't know he had it for a period of time, and his doctor basically told him, stay at home. And he's, thankfully recovering. But there are a lot of people who have this virus, this lethal virus, and they don't know they have it, but they could infect others who are much more vulnerable to very serious health implications. And so that's why we cannot afford to undervalue this or underestimate it.
Do we know whether those who have had the virus and recovered, those who have been infected and recovered, whether they're immune? And do we know for how long their immunity might last?
Good question. I'm hearing mixed stories about antibodies, about the ability to develop antibodies within your system that make you immune. I've heard different things, and I think that's the subject of further study. We'd all like to believe that to be true.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Jay Johnson.
Yes,
do you think you and I will be at the Super Bowl next January?
I believe we will have a Super Bowl. It may be that not every seat is filled, but there will be a Super Bowl with a halftime show. I believe that. I predict that.
With a halftime show. So we'll relax social distancing at least sometime before January.
I hope that to be true, and I believe that to be true.
So when do you think we'll start?
Good question. There are a number of preconditions to entering into a phased return to a new normal. I think that we've got to get our testing regime in place. I think we've got to have our contact tracing regime in place. But this will be, I don't want to get out ahead of the governors here, this will be something that is the subject of further deliberation and further study. But it does seem to me that those two prerequisites have to exist before we can start bringing people.
So in your view, this will have to be done in 50 state houses?
It's interesting. The vice president in an interview said that we have the testing in place to go to phase one of the White House plan. If you read the White House plan very carefully and you read what phase one is, phase one looks an awful lot like where we were in early March. Phase one of the White House plan is continued sheltering in place of the vulnerable population, closing common areas, continuing social distancing, continuing a limit on non-essential travel. So the phase one of the White House plan still has a lot of limits and restrictions in place. So in one respect, it's easy for the vice president to say, we have the testing in place now for that phase one, but the more serious return to new normal, I think we're going to have much more.
We have a long way to go. Well, this has been just marvelous, Jay Johnson. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. So I wish I could shake your hand. One day I will be able to. And thank you for coming by. And thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more virtual conversations, I guess. And I'm Jim Zirin. Take care, be safe, and all the best.